Hey everyone, welcome to the Zeitgeist on A Mighty Blaze. I am your host, Jane Roper. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest is Kia Corthron, and Kia is a playwright and novelist. Her debut novel, The Castle Cross, the Magnet Carter, sorry, many words, was published in 2016, right? Is it 2016? Mm-hmm. Yes, and was named a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, was awarded the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Her second novel, which we'll be talking about today, is Moon and the Mars. They're in many editions behind Kia as well. She is the author of numerous plays, which have been produced in New York and across the U.S. and internationally. She's written a little for television, writing for The Wire and The Jury. She has taught writing to incarcerated youth and adults, death row exonerees, veterans, the chronically ill, university students, and others. She's lived in New York City since 1988, most of that time in Harlem. Is that where you're joining us from today? NYC. Awesome. The Moon and Mars is set in the impoverished Five Points district of New York City during the years 1857 to 1863. It's as seen through the eyes of Theodora Brigid Brook, an orphan living between the homes of her Black and Irish grandmothers. She witnesses everything from the creation of tap dance to P.T. Barnum's sensationalist museum to the draft riots that tear the city asunder amidst the daily maelstrom of 5 Points, work, hardship, and camaraderie. Meanwhile, white America's attitudes toward people of color and slavery are shifting painfully, transformationally, as the nation divides and marches to war. The Moon and the Mars was on all kinds of must-read and best books lists for the fall, including Powell's Picks of the Month, Publishers Weekly Big Indie Books of Fall 2021, Boston.com's books for the fall. The Chicago Review of Books, which named it a 12 must-read books of August, says Corthron's new historical epic spins an absorbing and linguistically nimble tale that proves Corthron is one of our most dynamic and risk-taking writers. Welcome, Kia. It's so great to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Jane.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, I will let viewers know that if you make a comment or ask a question, you will be automatically entered to win a copy of the book. So please enter your comments. Just say hello if you want. Ask a question, and we'll try to fit it in if we can. So, gosh, I have so much I want to ask you about this amazing book, and just a few pages in, I remember thinking, whoa, okay, this is different, and this is going to be an adventure, and the voice is so distinct. You've got so much history, jammed in here. I mean, it really feels epic in scope, even though it's seen through the eyes as sort of daily life and the daily moments of this kid, Theo. We see in the course of the book everything from the ramifications of the Fugitive Slave Act and the Dred Scott case, Bleeding Kansas, build up to the Civil War, the draft riots, and also we get a glimpse of some of what's happened back in Ireland, Irish history through Theo's Irish relatives. One of the funny moments in the book is where the name Oliver Cromwell comes up, and both Theo and her grandmother, I think, like instinctively go spit. I love that. But it's this sort of trick you pull where we see all of these big grown-up important events, but through the eyes of a child. And you use a lot of different techniques to filter it through things she hears, things she sees around her, overheard conversations, posters. So I'm dying to know what made you choose to have your narrator be a young girl.
I don't think I can say that. I think it was organic when I think back on it.
Yeah,
because I just immediately wanted her to be a child. I wanted this to be, because it's from 1857 to 1863, and then there's a epilogue later.
Right.
I just naturally felt like it should be a child. In retrospect, when I think back, I think was because, so she's an orphan. She has but she has family because she has her Black and grandmother and Black aunt, and her Irish grandmother and an Irish aunt, and she lives between their tenements, the grandmother's tenements. Um, I think I wanted somebody that doesn't see the prejudice, doesn't see racism, doesn't really see classism. I mean, everybody's
Mhm.
poor. So, I mean, to some degree, they're sort of like, um, there's the rich people, that's an
Right.
awareness, but think I think it's more an intellectual awareness more than a sense of want, because she has
Yes.
everything that she needs in this
Mhm.
very poverty-stricken neighborhood, very
Yes.
rich in family, and so, yeah, I think that's, and I also, there are times, when the reader may understand things that Theo doesn't understand, even though it's completely in first person, but these
Yes.
things are going on. Um, so she's 7 at the beginning, and it goes to the time she's 13, and then again, there's an epilogue later. So she slowly comes into an understanding,
Right.
but I think that's instinctually why I wanted to start with her being very small
Mhm.
yeah, it's just, and also it's just such a wonderful adventurous world in 5 points, so yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I could just imagine her sort of running around and encountering all these people and having this sort of very, very free, independent kind of existence for such a young kid.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a great point that she doesn't quite have the judgments and the criticisms or that sort of awareness that she would have even a few years later. She's just all, yeah, everything. She's taking it all in, and so that way we as readers are sort of to take it all in too, and sort of hear it filtered through her. I'd love to hear you read some, and I think getting a sense of that wonderful voice, of Theo's voices, will give people a sense of the book. And I love that you really showed her pronunciation, her, not just her but all of the characters, the
Mhm.
dialect, the language, and it's something you don't see a ton in books, even historical books. So it added a musicality to the book that I love. So
Yeah, I think that's part coming from theater and, as
mm,
a playwright, with the dialogue. So for me, part of the story is in the dialogue. If I didn't,
yes,
which was a reason why, for quite a while I was doing all this research before I could jump in and write, because I really, it was, the Irish voices, the voice of an
mhm,
escaped slave. There were just so much dialect from that time, eventually I had to jump in and learn as I was writing,
right,
yeah, for me, part of telling the story is in the dialogue, which
right.
the dialect, yes.
Right, and yeah, capturing the rhythms of speech, and you could really hear that in the difference between the Irish and Black families, and yeah, fantastic. So yes, take it away. Read something for us.
So this is, oh, and by the way, this is, I was just saying, this is also the UK version, so this of the book. But I am going to actually um, read from right off my computer. I did this once,
Sure.
and someone said, "Did you memorize that?" No, it's just I'm reading off of my computer.
It
So I'm
creates, it's an illusion. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to read two very short pieces, because I want a little of the Black family, a little of
Mhm,
the Irish family. So the first, which is part of the Black family, is the very top of the book, the very beginning of the book.
mhm.
So Theo, this is 1857, and Theo is 7 years old. Mutt I am. Irish in the black, black in the Irish, colored, Celtic, County Kerry, African. What you saying in there? Called Grammy from the front room. Nothing. Talking to yourself again, mutter Grammy to herself. Throw the cover off. I jump out of bed. Brrr. Woke up alone in the bed I share. Alone in the bed closet, in the apartment, in the tenement of Grammy Brook. Come out to the front room grinning. What you grinning for? She asked, smiling. Then hold out something warm, something sweet. Johnny cake. Happy birthday, birthday girl. Thank you, Grammy. Careful, hot. Ah, told ya, hot. How old's Miss Theo today? Asked Mr. Freeman. 7. 7. That's a good one. Mr. Freeman nod. Mr. Freeman, our boarder, sit in the chair having his bread and coffee breakfast. His bedroll rolled up, rolled to the corner. Our apartment have 2 rooms, front room and bed closet. Gran sit in her chair next to the front window near the door. Gran always at her window looking down on Park Street. Gran is Grammy's mammy. So what you gonna do today, Miss Seven? Grammy asked, ironing her whites for the whites. The wet ones hung all over our apartment. I'll sing a song for you, Grammy. That's what I want to do for my birthday. Good girl. Grammy switch irons. Grammy told me why ironing need 2 irons. One to use hot till it cool, while the other getting hot on the coals. Hark the herald angels sing. Oh, that's that pretty new one. That song old, Grammy. 2 years old. That song come to be when I was 5. You told me. Glory to the newborn king. Your papa would have been proud of you. I knew she'd say that. Every time I have a birthday, Grammy Brooks smile teary and say my dead father, her dead son Ezekiel, would have been proud of me. And I'm going to read a little piece. So that was the very beginning of the book. This is from the middle of the book. So this is the summer of 1859. Theo is 9.5 years old. She's with Kieran, who is 11 years old, and he is a family friend who came from Ireland and is living with her Irish grandmother. She also mentions her Auntie Siobhan, who's her Irish aunt, and her Grammy Cahill, who has a table on the street and she sells all sorts of used junk. We hear the music a block away before me and Karen step inside the dance emporium. Packed, hot. A colored man at the piano, Irish fiddler, colored with the banjo. Everybody dancing, everybody jaunty. Only once did I ever attend a Kaylee back home, say Kieran, smiling. What's a Kaylee? Hold down, Americans say. Partner dancing. The music, the dance floor clearing, everybody backing away from the center. Kieran and me craning our necks to see. An Irish man and a colored man come out, shuffling and stomping, finger snapping, heel spinning, kickety clickety, tap tap tap, the fancy footwork. Everyone whooping and cheering, more, 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 and they give us more. Then Kieran touched my arm, point, as if I couldn't see myself who took the floor replacing the men. Auntie Siobhan lift her dress so we spy her ankles, stomping and clomping, slip slide, her feet so fast I hardly see 'em, rat-a-tat-tatting like rain on the roof. Then a colored man danced right up to Auntie Siobhan, click stomping faster. Then she go faster, then he go faster. They ain't partnering, they competing. Everybody clapping and hooting, tap it, tap it, tap it. Auntie Siobhan win. Them both laughing. Then Auntie Siobhan go to the bar, leaning on it, the sweat pouring. Me happy the room's so crowded, she can't see me and Kieran here seeing her. Other people's dance competing now, but hard for me take my eyes off my auntie. She swig her drink down, then turned to look right at Kieran and me. Give us a wink. Next morning, Auntie Vaughn won the dancing last night. Grammy Hill's eyes look narrow at me over her table. And how would you know that? Oh, say nearby Maeve, Grammy's dearest friend and fiercest competitor. Your old granny's the real stepper in the family. Bella Carey, she was. Grammy, who'd been getting ready to snap at me for being where I shouldn't have been, now go a little pink. Then smile. Oh, granddaughter, close your mouth before it feels the flies. What you saw last night when you were where you shouldn't have? They're the steps we brought over from the aisle. Yes, I had quite the click in my heels, stomping all over the county. Siobhan was the one I passed the magic feed on to. Then I, click, click, shuffle, slip, slide. Grammy takes a laughing. Maeve say, look like your fancy feet moved down another generation. Grammy's eyes look to the left, look to the right, no approaching customers. Then, sitting in her chair, her feet under the table start to move. Clickety tap, click. So that's it. And I forgot,
Wonderful.
as I usually do, to apologize for my Irish accent. But you never, if I don't do it, then people can't tell the difference between
Yeah, I
Irish.
told you it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. Got my people back in Ireland. I love it. It's great. But yeah, okay, so people watching, you see what I mean? Like, and you open this book and it's just like these voices coming at you, and it's just fantastic. And I mean, yes, hearing you read it is a delight, and it's similar to what I was hearing going on. But absolutely, is there an audiobook? Because I feel like,
Yes, yes.
do you read it?
No, no.
Oh,
The actress reads it, but she and I talked a lot, and I think she does a really good job with it. So
yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Oh gosh, yeah. So what was it about this particular time and place in New York, this era, that you were drawn to? What was the spark that said, this is where I want to set this, and when?
Yeah, I was really interested in the relationships between Black and Irish at that time, which because they were both, especially in Five Points, which was the most impoverished area of New York City, because they were both such poor communities, there was a lot of camaraderie. And there was also competition, and tensions could rise, especially um, I so the Republican Party, which in part, halfway through the book, Lincoln is elected,
Right.
and that party was formed. It was a very young party at that time, and it was basically formed as to abolish slavery. I mean, that was the uh, yeah, that was the now I should say Lincoln was so they were all abolitionists.
Right.
Lincoln was more moderate,
Right.
to say that no slavery in the new territories, new
Right.
states, where radicals were like abolish it everywhere. So there was um there were uh some white abolitionists
Mhm.
who would be the comparable white liberals of the day, or I'm talking about the privileged ones,
Right.
who I mean, definitely had prejudice of their own, racism, but also some of them could be very friendly to the Black community and very dismissive of the Irish community.
Interesting.
The flip side, some Irish that had been in the country for a while were just starting to come into political power.
Mhm.
So,
You have Tammany Hall, right?
exactly, was just coming,
Right.
into existence at that time.
Right.
So then there was, that power that was, conservative. They were the Democrats, they were conservative, and they could say, if slavery ends, the poor Irish will have all this competition, more competition for jobs. So in a way, it's like a situation, as often happens to this day, where the
Right.
powers that be were a dividing
Right.
force of communities that would have been best united. They stood,
Right.
and
Right.
um,
Something that continues to this day, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Looking
yeah.
at the folks sort of the next rung down as the enemy, as opposed to looking
Mhm,
at the folks at the top as the enemy.
mhm.
Now, was intermarriage between Black and Irish folks common back then, or Black and other white immigrants or white citizens?
In Five Points, it was, yes,
Five
yes.
points. Okay. Yeah.
Not necessarily in other places,
Mhm.
and um, uh, you know, there were definitely moments, um, race riots. I mean, I read something, when was I think maybe the 40s, 30s or 40s, 1930s or 40s. Until then, when people said race riots,
Mm.
by the mid 20th century, sometimes people thought of race riots as destruction of property,
Right.
and that it perpetrated by people of color
Mhm.
against the system. But until that time, race riots were always the people in power violent against the people not in power. So race riots would be white against black,
Right.
for example. So those things periodically happened in New York, but for the most part, in terms of interracial relationships, it was more just thinking of them as trashy. It was
Ah,
more like that. Yeah. So it's more
interesting.
just the nose in the air about it. Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Right, right. I guess there's certain people who still think that. And I mean, that was something that drew me to reading your book in the first place, is what I anticipated some of the parallels would be with current day, and they were there in some ways. I mean, reading about the nativists, right, who are this force,
Mhm,
this anti-immigration force, and
mhm,
also racist, but it was like it's reminded me so much of certain segments of the population today who worry about foreign influence, who worry about
mhm.
immigrants. And I wondered if part of, what drew you was to this subject and to this milieu was looking at how that's something that's always existed in our country, that nativist sentiment.
Yes, yes, but, well, for me, I feel like it's important to look at history to know how we got today
Yes,
to
right.
today. So I certainly didn't wanna write it as, "It's okay, it's always been this way," like, that was that was
Right, sure.
um,
Look, it'll be fine.
yes, yes. But, uh, um, actually, somebody said something like that to me recently, like that there was always tension against there was always controversy about, vaccination. So therefore,
Oh,
it's fine, there's content. I was thinking, "No, I think that's a different thing." I'm not
right,
sure that's true, but,
right,
so anyway, yeah, so I wanted to look at history, but also while I was looking at history, I always had an eye on today.
right.
So yes, when, for example, Miriam, who is she was enslaved and she escaped, and early in the book, she, comes into Theo's life as part of her, she poses as her aunt, part of her family, her black family. Um, and as I was writing that, I was thinking, she was a refugee below the border and came above the border. So I was thinking definitely of those sorts of issues of below the
Mhm,
border refugees.
mhm.
When I wrote, there's a section where in a couple of pages, I decide to give the 1,000-year history of Ireland, and
Yep. Yep.
and at this time, during that time period, was the formation of the Irish Republic and Brotherhood.
Right.
And when I brought that in, it was really important for me um, to be aware of what people in Ireland felt about the IRA today. So I
Right.
wrote that um, with so there was an awareness at the same time. It wasn't that uh, while while the world is of that time, and I put myself in that time, I always had the awareness of now. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Because people are coming to it with a modern consciousness, and they're going to
Mhm,
be like, yeah, digesting it that way. So you necessarily have to have that sort of mindset. And maybe there are ways people would have spoken, or ways they would have reflected on events then, that might, to us, I don't know, it could put up a wall between the reader and the book. And that's probably something you would not want to do.
yeah. Although I will say I don't think I cheated.
Right, right. Yeah.
So when I had that consciousness, um, you know, uh, nobody suddenly comes out and says, "So no immigrants from the below the border should be,"
Right,
there's like
right, right.
right?
And
But,
let this be a
but
lesson to us
yes,
forevermore.
yes, yes. So I had that consciousness, but then I made sure that it was infiltrated into that time, how they would have
Right,
spoken.
right,
So they don't have that double consciousness, but what
right.
they're saying has that for the reader can hear it.
For the
So,
reader. Yes, yes.
yes.
No, absolutely. Um, so I'm very curious about the research process for this. I couldn't believe. I mean, your like bibliography in here is a book in and of itself. It goes. I don't know if people see it. Like goes on for pages. It's amazing. So you must enjoy that kind of research.
I do. It's funny when when it was published, and then the places are putting the booksellers, the number of pages, and I would always thought, don't count the bibliography. That makes me twice as long.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love doing that stuff. I guess I guess I'm just OCD about being as accurate as I can be. And
Yeah.
so little details, I would go on some crazy Googling hole for like, to get like a little detail for like
Sure.
hours.
Yeah.
And most it was successful. There were a couple of times when I was just like, okay, I've looked for days on this. I'm not going to find the answer. I just have to do the best I can with
Right.
this. But
Yeah.
but yeah, because I actually I mean, I think the history is so interesting, things that we've forgotten. I mean, when I like very early on, I was thinking, what do what did people do for entertainment at this time when early? And I thought, was it an art museum? The Met just celebrated its 150th anniversary, so it wasn't.
Mhm.
I think it comes just a little bit. I think between the story and the epilogue, it actually came in existence. So I was like, what do people do? And then it was like, oh, that's when I discovered Barnum's museum,
Yes.
American Museum. So what would have come out of my imagination was not nearly as interesting as the reality of what was going
Right.
on. So before Barnum got into the circus business,
Right.
he had this huge museum that had everything in it.
Mhm.
It's where Tom Thumb became a
Right.
star. And who, by the way, Charles Stratton, his real
His
name,
real
his
name,
stage
yeah.
name was Tom Thumb. And, reading about that was just very interesting because, I think people have many opinions about what he called the human oddities, basically
Right.
people of disability.
Right.
But but there's, in reading about, there's a difference between people who were just there to be gawked at because
Right.
they were born with no arms and could do everything with their feet,
Right.
um, or people like Tom, who was just an incredible entertainer who just happened to be
Performers. Yeah.
small.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So this ties in the question from Margaret. How to research right, but did you find something that changed the story you had in your head? Was there anything, and I was going to ask too, was there anything that surprised you when you were doing your research?
Everything. I mean, there's like that was one thing that surprised me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I I have to think about it, but I probably in every single chapter. So my process was that I would go through the year, see what was going on in the country and in the city,
Hmm.
and then I would check a little bit also see what's going on in Ireland at the time,
Right.
and then I would figure out what which of these events can affect this family,
Hmm.
and um, and then I would divide it into the chapters. And so, yes, the history very much guided what was happening in the
Right.
story. Here's an example. There were a whole lot all over the city, all these tobacco factories,
Hmm.
and a huge thing, mostly making cigars. And because um, a lot of the skill of cigar rolling came from tobacco plantations. A
Hmm.
lot of it was brought from Black men in the South, and women, because there were a lot of women working these factories.
Right.
And I it was either or passed down from Black men who had been in the South. So actually, Black men were paid the most in those factories, more than white men, because they had the skills.
Interesting. Interesting.
So yeah. Um, I could think of lots of things if I stop and think about it that
Yeah.
were surprising to me, but yeah, it was for me, having that foundation of this really rich reality
Yeah.
and then using my imagination, it was like already had this fantastic foundation to, and then start with that, as opposed to just making things up because I don't feel like researching it or something. The research was fantastic.
Right, right. And the history really forms the spine of the novel in a way. Even
Mhm.
though, you know, there are the personal stories along the way, it does create this foundation that you build and sort of weave upon. And
Yeah, yeah. Now now because of that question, I keep thinking of things that surprise me.
right, right.
So I started that, chimney sweeps for Black men's work, and a lot of
Mhm.
children actually to get into the
Little spaces, yeah.
yes, yes,
Mhm,
yes.
mhm.
Yeah.
And one thing I mean, I learned so much from reading it. One thing that struck me was the fact that Seneca Village, which was
Mm,
this Black neighborhood, mostly, although it had started to have some Irish and I guess German immigrants living
mhm.
there as well, but was raised basically to make way for Central Park. And the other day, someone on Twitter, I can't remember who, what wrote, and I should have looked this up, but it was a Black woman, a academic of some sort, but she was saying every time I drive on an expressway, I wonder what Black neighborhood was raised to put the expressway
Um,
through.
mm.
So I was really struck by that. Like, gosh, I had no idea, that this sort of thing where neighborhoods of poor people end up getting
Oh, yes, yes,
victims of
yes.
development.
Yeah, the main thing, and it's definitely happened, I know in the West with, Latino neighborhoods and
Yep.
Asian neighbors, many, neighbors of color. The big thing historically were freeways that would split
Right.
a neighborhood and would go right through the
Right through
neighborhood.
the middle.
But it was always, yeah, yeah, eminent domain, they would say,
Right.
which was the term basically to say that, you know, if it helps if it's the common good, they can do this. They can,
Right.
which of course is, whose common good, because
Right.
it was never ever through wealthy neighborhoods
No,
would these things happen. But
of
yes.
course. Yeah, of course.
Um,
No, absolutely.
and
Um,
that particular thing was especially significant
mm,
because, um, all white men could vote, but
right.
Black men had to have a certain amount of, property to be able to vote in New York. Because New York was free since, 1827,
Mhm.
but yeah, but there were all these rules, and one of them was, well, women couldn't vote at all,
Right.
but Black men had to have a certain amount of property. So there were only a handful of Black men who could vote, and
Mhm.
almost all of them were in Seneca Village, so they lost the vote when,
There they go. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Right. One of the things in your book, in each of the families, there is someone who's sort of a foster, is taken in. So you
mhm.
have Miriam. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it
Yes, mhm,
Miriam? Right,
mhm.
who had escaped from slavery and was taken in by the Brooke family. And then you have Kieran, whose mother had been taken in by the family, and then he sort of comes in. Just curious why, was this something that was just very commonly done, or was there something that drew you to this idea of having sort of a foster
Mhm.
member of the family in
Yeah,
each?
actually both.
Mm.
It was very common to have people, well, for example, Mr. Freeman, the boarder that I read,
Right,
it was very in these small tenement apartments, it was
right,
very common to have boarders,
right.
and yeah, to have a lot of people in the small apartment, and taking in people, that was very common. For me, I chose, these particular people because, so the book is structured, there are 36 chapters, and the
Mhm.
first chapter, which I read from. It's her 7th birthday. That's how it all starts. And
Mhm.
I basically introduce both families, and it's her, completely, utopian existence in
Right.
5 points for the first chapter. And the second chapter is when her world is kind of rocked because
Right.
both these people come into, her life on the same day. Because before then, she was actually the youngest of both families. So she was
Right.
definitely the center of
The
attention.
center of attention, right? So she's not too happy at first about,
Yes, yes.
yeah, more people coming into the picture for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it sounds like most of your work is as a playwright,
Yes,
primarily.
novels are new.
Are new
So
to you.
this is my
Yes. Okay.
second novel. Yes, yes.
So now I think we heard and hearing you read it, and that the dialogue and the voice are a big part of that. And I imagine that really is, as you mentioned, an influence of your history, with playwriting and with theater.
Mhm.
What else did you? I'm curious about the contrast in your process for writing a play versus writing a novel. Do you like one better than the other, or what do you think?
Well, it's similar and different. I mean, there are things that are similar and things that are different. My first novel, because I've been a playwright most of my life, I immediately always would think of play when I'm writing a story,
Yeah.
but it was just too big a story. I didn't know it was going to be that big, but I knew it was bigger than like a 2-hour evening experience.
Right.
This one from the very beginning, I knew it was a novel. Yeah, I think it has to do with does have to do a lot with the size of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the one thing that I love about novels is that I can spread out in many ways. My first novel, at one point, I went through every character because I wanted to never, which is more epic even more than this now, it's bigger even so, and I wanted not to repeat the names, and I realized I had, like, over 100 characters in the
Right.
book, and,
Right.
and so, yes, visually, and there's just so many ways that I can spread out with
Yeah.
the novel, and, it's not to say one is better than the other,
Right.
it's a different experience, and I feel I was conscious of the fact in writing novels that I could write a play that may be 2 hours and be 2 hours of a character's life, or it could be like one of my plays was 14 years of a character's
Right.
life. She was
Mhm.
16, then 30. Another one, it went through 2 centuries. But whatever it is, I'm only getting that 2 hours of the character's life.
Right.
Um, so it's very much a snapshot. I mean, that's not to say
Yeah.
I don't know my characters well and
Sure.
deeply, but it's very much a snapshot. Whereas I feel that even though this is only through 7 years plus the epilogue, still it goes very deep in a certain way
Yes.
into so
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that way it goes
Right.
yeah. I think, it's funny because I was talking with somebody recently about it. It's almost as if, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but as if the reader, I think, would feel that they're part of the room, that they're in there with the characters. I think, maybe.
Mhm. Yes.
Whereas with a play, maybe you feel like you're watching it from a window. It's a little voyeuristic. So
Yes.
you're a little yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great way of describing it. And I do feel like, especially in a first person novel, you
Mhm, mhm,
feel it, immersed in it in a way that it's like you're seeing it from a first person perspective, and
mhm,
really, yeah, you're
mhm,
right in there. And you can get enmeshed in it, and it's a different kind of experience for sure.
mhm,
So we
mhm.
had a couple people asking about, Kat Mazer, both Castle Cross and Moon and the Mars are incredible novels. What are you working on next? And also, Margaret would like to know, are you going to write more novels? Combo
I
question.
I am going to write another novel. I have it, but it's very, very early. Too early for me to really talk about it, but I
Yeah,
definitely am writing another novel. Right now, I am working a little bit on a couple of play projects.
cool.
One of them, actually, I'm going to have a play done probably in about a year at Arena Stage, which is a big theater in Washington D.C., and I'm working on a
Mhm.
couple of those plays. But yes, definitely, I have an idea for a new novel. Yes.
Nice, nice. It's cooking. It's cooking. Awesome. All righty. Well, so before we go, do we have a winner of the giveaway? Catherine Mazer. All right. Yes, you are the winner of the Moon and Mars. And even if you've already read it, you can give away your copy as a Christmas present or a Hanukkah present or something. So wonderful, wonderful news. Great. Congrats. So what you need to do, Kat, is PM us, email us, and we'll get your information, and you can, we'll make sure that copy gets out to you. Thank you for watching. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you so much, Kia, for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Jen. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. Really, so happy to have discovered your work, and I'm really glad we could have you on the show today.